So, you want to buy a storage unit facility, a metal box, a concrete slab, a roll-up door? No chef, no dealer, no pilot, no gate agent. Just an empty room that rents itself. Sounds like the easiest business on this list, and in a way it is. The self-storage industry in the US alone is worth more than $50 billion a year, spread across over 60,000 facilities. And here's the part that should stop you. A well-run facility keeps 60 to 70% of every dollar of revenue as pure operating profit. Always compare that to a restaurant where you're lucky to keep 10. You're not selling a product. You're selling square footage that costs you almost nothing to maintain to a customer who will, statistically, forget to move out. Let's start with what it actually costs to get in. Option 1. The small independent facility, a single-story metal building, maybe 30,000 square feet, no climate control. Construction alone runs $25 to $50 per square foot, so somewhere between $750,000 and $1.5 million before you've bought the land. Add the land and permits, and you're looking at $2 to $3 million all in for a facility with a few hundred units. Option 2, the multi-story climate-controlled facility in a suburban market. Now, you're building at $65 to $120 a square foot, and a 60,000 square foot building lands you somewhere around $8 to $12 million once you include land, site work, and security systems. Option 3, you don't build anything. You buy into the machine that already exists. Public Storage alone owns and operates roughly 3,000 facilities across the country. The 5 largest self-storage owners in America control only about 16% of the market. The other 84% is still regional operators and independents, which is exactly why private equity has been buying this industry up one facility at a time for the last 15 years. Now here's the part that actually matters. What are you selling? On paper, you're selling a locked room. In practice, you're selling forgetting. A person rents a 10 by 10 unit during a divorce, a move, a death in the family, a business closing. The month they sign, the stuff going into that unit feels essential. 18 months later, most of it is furniture they'll never sit on again and boxes they can't remember the contents of. But canceling the unit means admitting they don't need it, driving out to sort through it, and making a decision. So they don't. They just keep paying. The industry has a name for this. It's called inertia, and it is the single most reliable revenue mechanism in the entire business. National occupancy across institutionally run facilities sits around 92%, and the average tenant now stays over 12 months, with 64% of renters sticking around longer than a year without ever opening the door. The official way this makes money is simple. Monthly rent. National revenue per square foot averages somewhere between $14 and $22 a year, depending on the market, with coastal cities pushing well past that. But rent is only the beginning. The real profit engine is something called the Existing Customer Rate Increase, or ECRI. Here's how it works. You advertise a unit online at a low introductory rate to win the customer away from the facility down the street. Then, once they've moved their furniture in and the switching cost has become real, you raise the rate. Not once, repeatedly. Some renters report increases of 8, 10, even 15% every few months. The math is brutal and simple. It costs almost nothing to keep charging a tenant who is already inside your building and extremely unlikely to move a couch and a dead relative's china cabinet somewhere else over a $20 hike. Then there's the ancillary revenue, the stuff that isn't rent at all. Tenant insurance is the biggest piece of it. Public Storage alone has issued certificates of insurance covering more than $5.6 billion in stored goods to over 1 million customers, and this insurance is sold at markup by the facility itself. Then there's merchandise, locks, boxes, packing tape, sold directly at the front desk. Then there's the administrative fee, charged once at move-in, purely for the privilege of signing paperwork. And then there's the late fee, which in some markets can add 20 to 40% onto an unpaid balance before a lien ever gets filed. Which brings us to the part of this business that would be flatly illegal in almost any other industry. If a tenant stops paying, the facility doesn't need a court order to take their property. 46 states give storage operators what's called lien rights, the legal ability to seize the contents of an unpaid unit and sell them at public auction to recover the debt. The waiting period varies by state, 14 days in Texas, 45 in Missouri, but the mechanism is the same everywhere. Cut the lock, inventory the unit, post a public notice, and auction the contents to the highest bidder. Whatever's left over after the debt is paid is technically owed back to the tenant, but most of it is never claimed. This is the entire premise behind storage wars, and it's not a game show gimmick. It's a built-in legal remedy that every operator in the country has the right to use. There's also a structural gift hiding in the tax code. Most of the largest storage operators, Public Storage, Extra Space, CubeSmart, are structured as REITs, Real Estate Investment Trusts. As long as a REIT distributes at least 90% of its taxable income to shareholders as dividends, it pays no corporate income tax on that income at all. The tax bill effectively gets pushed down to individual shareholders instead of being paid twice. For a business already running at 60 to 70% margins, that's the difference between a good return and an exceptional one. But the same aggressive pricing model that makes this business so profitable is exactly what's now landing operators in court. In February 2026, New York City's Department of Consumer and Worker Protection filed its first ever lawsuit against a self-storage company, going after Extra Space Storage directly. The complaint alleges a pattern the department had received over 100 consumer complaints about renters lured in with a low advertised rate, then hit with rate increases they say were buried in the fine print, on top of separate claims of uncontrolled rat infestations and destroyed belongings. Extra Space's response was that the practices were expressly permitted under New York state law and clearly outlined in the lease, which may be legally true and still be the exact business model the entire industry is quietly built on. An inside voice at the company later summed it up as the ECRI, chickens coming home to roost. It's not the first time. A separate class action, Ionescu versus Extra Space Storage, made nearly the identical allegation back in 2019, and the company has separately settled a related case for $5 million. The pattern doesn't change because the incentive doesn't change. Raising the rate on a tenant who has already moved in is close to free money, right up until a regulator decides to look at it. Now the cost side, because a storage facility is cheap to run but not free. Operating expense ratios typically land between 30 and 40% of revenue. That covers property taxes, insurance on the building itself, a skeleton staff, often just 1 or 2 people managing a facility that might hold 500 units, security systems, cameras, gate access, and increasingly, software and dynamic pricing algorithms that adjust rates automatically based on occupancy. Climate control adds real cost too, another $15 to $30 a square foot on construction, plus the ongoing electricity to keep hundreds of individually sealed rooms at a stable temperature and humidity. It's not glamorous, but it's a real number every single month, whether the units are full or not. And that's the risk nobody mentions when they pitch you on buying one of these. The moat is thin. Unlike an airport or a casino, there's no license, no monopoly, no geographic lock. If your facility is doing well, the empty lot across the street becomes a very obvious idea to somebody else. New supply nationally has been running at roughly 2 to 3% of existing inventory every year, and in markets that get overbuilt, operators end up in rate wars, discounting move-in prices, giving away the first month free, cutting web rates by 8 to 10%, just to keep the physical occupancy number from sliding. The building costs the same to insure and staff whether it's 60% full or 95% full. So every point of occupancy you lose to a new competitor down the road comes almost straight out of your margin. Time to pull it together and answer the actual question. How much money do you make if you do this right? 3 scenarios, real numbers. Option 1, the small independent facility. 30,000 square feet, roughly 250 units, built and land acquired for about $2.5 million. At 85% occupancy and an average rate around $16 a square foot, annual revenue lands close to $400,000. After a 35% expense ratio, you're netting around $260,000 a year. Payback, close to 10 years. But the land and the license only appreciate from here. Option 2, the mid-size climate-controlled facility. 60,000 square feet, built for around $10 million including land. Revenue at full stabilization runs around $1 million a year. Net profit after expenses, roughly $650,000 a year. Payback, about 15 years on the building alone, faster if you finance smart and let ECRI do its work on year 2 and 3 tenants. Option 3, you skip development entirely and buy a stabilized multi-facility portfolio the way the institutions do, at a cap rate of 5 to 7.5% on stabilized net operating income, meaning roughly 13 to 20 times annual profit. A portfolio generating $5 million a year in net operating income trades hands for somewhere between $65 and $100 million, and once you own it, there's no tenant to chase down, no lease to renegotiate, no plane to fuel. Just 100 locked doors, a rate increase notice going out every few months, and a lien auction scheduled for the ones who stop paying. Because that's what this business actually is, not storage. Forgetting, monetized by the square foot. Subscribe, share, and comment below. Thank you.